Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to Samuel Adams Returns. Those anti-federalists, they absolutely got it right here on Liberty Works Radio Network, where liberty does work for you. And this is Tom Navolis, your host, and I am so delighted to be back with you as we've completed this first week of April. And I don't know about your areas. I think in the Maryland market in particular, and across most of these upper states, and I know in Ohio for sure, is that as you can see, I'm in my vest and that, and it is maybe cold outside. That being that the snow came back in, not heavy, but just those flurries. Nice that the sunshine came back out and melted things. And I have some friends or a friend that is joining other people up in Michigan to go fishing, and they were making jokes about where they're going to put their boat in, that it's going to be something more like a bobsled run than it is taking and sliding one of those float boats down into the river. Anyway, interesting stuff that here we are, but that's not unusual. All this global warming stuff and everything, quite amazing, I would say. Well, today's program is chock full of things. Once again, I just never have the amount of time necessary to try and bring you all of the information available and how it ties in constitutionally, as well as how it may tie in, and as I go more and more into things that matter from those principles that are biblical. And some of what we're going to talk about today, I'd really like to hit on maybe three areas, if I can keep it to that. One is that, as you know, and in your state and all over the U.S., we're coming up on a primary season. And here in Ohio, we have some very interesting races going on. And the one that I will take a short amount of time to talk about today is our governor's race, especially with the primary for the Republican candidates and what is happening there. So that's kind of, one of the items I want to spend a few minutes in this first segment on and talk about. The next item that I think is important is, many of you, I know, go out and you do your own research, and we have so many other fantastic resources all week long. We have the Institute on the Constitution, does great programming every evening. And, what we have is a clearer understanding, I'm hoping you do, of what it is that President Trump is doing relative to putting the troops on the border. We're continuously hearing that conversation with those in the public media, or those that are in your family, or elsewise when you go to the coffee shop or out to dinner. The conversation may be, well, how is it that he can take and put troops down on the border? Well, as we know, he's not the first one to have done that. We've seen that Clinton did that, Bush did that, others have done that, other presidents have placed troops on the border for our protection. So we're going to talk about that. Where does the president get his constitutional authority, and why did he write the letter to the Secretary of Defense to actually look at how that is supposed to act and integrate? So we'll actually look at the U.S. Code, Title 32, I believe it is. Let me put my glasses on as I look at it. Yes, Title 32, as to what authorizes the president to be able to do that. And then lastly, in possibly the third segment, definitely in the third segment, as we do a carryover, I want to introduce my new book. I told you that a couple of weeks ago, I think, that as I received that first shipment of books, that I was going to start promoting the book this month in April, and continuing to do so in every segment as we prepare to launch the seminar series again in June. So I want to get that word out so that you understand what's happening with that. And I will show you the cover and just kind of give you a little brief run through on the book today. So, gives us a lot of territory to cover. So with that, and where are we at on time? I'm checking with Kathy. Okay, we're great. We're, about a third of the way into the segment. So here we go. Let's talk about the Ohio governor's race. Very interesting is that we have Mike DeWine and John Husted, who are already in office in Ohio. They're sitting in Secretary of State position and another position. Obviously, from that, not even remembering what positions they're in, that you can see my high level of interest in them. So what the other person that's running, which is very, very interesting, is the Kasich Lieutenant Governor, who is Mary Taylor. Now, Mary Taylor is been distanced by Kasich. And so as we start looking into these various candidates, it becomes incumbent upon us to understand that the first question one would have is that if Mary Taylor is the lieutenant governor, then she must have an extremely strong alliance to John Kasich. Wow. I'll tell you what, as I started learning about her and learning about her running mate, that is the furthest thing from the truth. It is Kasich who has distanced himself from Mary. And I can see why. Because in my research, it seems that Mary is a strong conservative. Mary and her running mate, Nathan, are very, very strong. And that's not something that Kasich really is standing up about and for, as we've seen since his presidential run. In addition, we keep seeing him running his mouth out there in an interesting way that is almost embarrassing to we, the citizens, at least to me, as a citizen of the state of Ohio. And now we'll do a little comparison and contrast here. And then with Mike DeWine, he was a senator, and, he's one of those types of guys that the only thing he's ever known is government service. He was a U.S. senator as well, and we're going to talk about that a little bit, which in verifying his record, it's appalling, quite frankly, to any conservative, to any true patriot, to anyone that absolutely believes in business, constitutionalism, rule of law. This guy has been very, very interesting, and I think he's pulled the wool over a lot of people's eyes, especially for the last 8 years. So let's kind of do this a little bit because I know we're going to run out of time. I really want to focus on Mr. DeWine and his record. So we have a lot going on with immigration, to which we're going to speak about here shortly, and it'll probably be in the next segment when we really jump into that, is that on immigration, let's see, Mike DeWine voted for amnesty, especially when he was in the Senate. He was in that gang of 14, not the gang of 12, but this is the gang of 14 from longer ago. And so he voted for amnesty. He voted yes on tuition for illegals, and voted yes on allowing illegal aliens to participate in Social Security. Is that really what Ohio wants? He's almost as bad as that Democrat that's running, that he wants, what is that, sanctuary? He's okay with sanctuary cities. So Mike DeWine, the way he voted, would tell me that he would not stand up against those cities here in the state of Ohio that are claiming to be sanctuary cities. So that really bothers me when I look at his senatorial voting record. Another area is on the Second Amendment. When we think about that, we think about the Bill of Rights. So when someone swears to an office, both here in the state of Ohio, and then they have to swear to the U.S. Constitution, that means they have to take both in whole. And when I read the Ohio State Constitution and have been studying that in detail, it is very explicit about our Second Amendment rights, our rights to bear arms, our rights to self-defense, and to defend the state and the United States. Very interesting. But he, on the Second Amendment, earned an F rating from the NRA when he sat in the Senate. He teamed up with Chuck Schumer in 2006 to undermine Second Amendment rights. So that makes me really, really wonder, what he would do as governor if different bills. And, Ohio has great legislation around gun ownership. We're actually an open carry state, but our concealed carry and reciprocity and all of that is really wonderful. So, that scares me with where Mike DeWine is. Then the one that I know a lot of my Christian conservative friends or my Christian patriot friends, especially here in Geauga County, are always asking about pro-life, pro-life, pro-life. Well, he undermined pro-life in that Second Amendment. In Second Amendment efforts, he voted yes for liberal judges. Get this, okay? Here it is. He voted to bring in Sonia Sotomayor and Merrick Garland, who was President Obama's eventual nominee to the Supreme Court. He led that Gang of 14 with Susan Collins and the Democrats to undermine President Bush conservative nominees. He voted yes on Eric Holder, who later did what? Fast and Furious and a whole bunch of other things that were against we the people. On tax and spending, he voted to raise the U.S. debt limit 6 times when he was in the Senate. And then Husted voted yes on the Taft tax increase. Interesting stuff. Families and education opposed Ohio's marriage amendment, and Husted ushered in Common Core through the Ohio House when he was in the Ohio House. DeWine and Husted have 60-plus year careers as career politicians with basically no private sector experience. Let's see. Mike DeWine lost to Sherrod Brown in 2006 by 12 points because of his liberal record, handing the Senate to Harry Reid and the Democrats. So is that somebody we really want to have in Ohio? I tell you, Mary Taylor, as I look at her record, not only as lieutenant governor, but what she did throughout her political career, but more so what she also has experience in the public sector. I'm telling you, if there's anybody in Ohio that listens to this network or is watching this program on YouTube, I highly recommend Mary Taylor. That's my personal opinion on this. She's got a long road to hoe because the Kasich machine, so here's the telling story for Ohioans, the Kasich machine is 100% behind Mike DeWine. So is that what you want? More John Kasich? So in my thought process, as I do the research on these candidates, what I see is that if you want Mike DeWine, that would be like voting for Hillary Clinton to give you 8 more years of Obama. So if you want 8 more years of Kasich in Ohio, then yeah, I guess you go with Mike DeWine. But if you want a Trump change, then I would highly recommend that you go with Mary Taylor and take a look at what her and Nathan are really about. I'm not going to spend the time in the rest of the program for that because I think I've given you enough to let you know Mike DeWine is not the guy I'm very interested in at all personally. And so I would, again, say look at Mary Taylor and her record because there's a lot there that is meaningful for patriots. And then as we come back into the next segment, because I see Kathy's showing me the clock and we're down to our last 30 seconds, we're going to talk about President Trump and what does it mean not only from his constitutional right and position under Article 2 to do what he's doing, but we're also going to look at U.S. Code and number 32 in the U.S. Code, and we're going to talk about that when Samuel Adams returns, because those anti-federalists, what? You know the answer. Come on, join me. The anti-federalists, they got it right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the second segment of Samuel Adams Returns. Those anti-federalists, yes, they did. They absolutely got it right. And you know what? Go look. As I always say, I mentioned earlier about the weekly and what we have on the Institute of the Constitution. I think that's a great program. They do a lot of educational stuff, and they really get down to the meat of the matter. But, you know, for the network to survive, it takes you. You know, this is a listener-funded network, and the network really needs your help. We're really at a time now where I think the network needs help more than any other time. So, you know what? Go look through all the other hosts and hostesses, see what is in your market area, see those programs that are of interest to you, and yes, do that. Take and push that donate button, and you know what? Every $5 that you could do, you know, put something, get some buckets into the ducket, folks. I really appreciate it for myself, but the network appreciates it more than anything else. So I really would highly recommend that. Also, I'm going to put a real quick plug in here for anybody in Northeast Ohio. Put on your calendar May 19th. We're going to be participating with the Lake County Liberty Coalition, and the Geauga County Liberty Coalition will be the Liberator Conference. I'm going to bring the flyer, and it is in the promo up on the website. You can go see it at my Facebook page. You can go see it on what I put out already on the promo to you, either in the email or out, as you well know, into the Facebook page and all the other good places where social media, you know, isn't totally broken. But with that, one of the things that I'd like to have that conversation on is what the Liberator Conference is. Take a look at the flyer. In the next segment, I'll take and I'm going to hold one up for you so you can really see what that's about. But you know, the secret is that the founders talked about taxation without representation. And we're going to talk about at that conference taxation with representation. And what does it mean on real calls to action? Keynote speaker I've had on this program before is Dan Johnson, young man that has been doing phenomenal work out there in getting a number of things passed across the nation. So I think it's interesting that he's coming up as our keynote. Other good speakers, other good programs, other good institutions. And, you know, I even hear that Sam Adams is going to be there as well, talking with a county commissioner about, we'll see what he talks about. So anyway, that's my little plug and promo for May 19th. It's going to be in Northeast Ohio at the Auburn Career Center in Concord, Ohio. So, you know, come on, join us. Go look up Liberator Network, either on Eventbrite or Liberator Network on, it'll be on, Facebook of all places. But check it out, or you can find it again on my Facebook page. So let's get into what everybody's kind of, you know, trying to figure out, wrestling with. And, you know, there's a few commentators that are out there talking about the actual reality and facts, and where is it that it is allowed within either the duties of the president, or more so, where is it imposed on the duties of Congress to protect us from invasion. Now, you hear all the liberal press whining and crying that, oh, those 1,500 people, that wasn't an invasion, that was, you know, people that are having problems in Honduras, so on and so forth. Phooey. I like that. What's that Neil Wolf program that was on a number of years ago? I kind of picked that up. Phooey! You know, phooey! That's nonsense. You know that it was a staged, absolutely staged event by a political group funded by Soros, and I've got it all in front of me here on the computer, and we'll kind of touch bases on it. But this was criminal activity because this group went to a foreign country, broke the Honduran laws for immigration, broke Mexican law on immigration, raised a regiment, 1,500 people when they started out, that is a regiment, and marched them, trains, buses, I guess it goes to that old John Candy movie. What was it? Planes, trains, and automobiles, whatever method. Well, most of it was on foot. And they were the supply mechanism to make sure that this column of 1,500 could make this move. Well, I started tweeting when I first saw it on, was it Saturday, Sunday, I think it was. And I started hitting Twitter with it. I started hitting other social media with it, that this was a regiment on the move and that the president had to take action. By Tuesday, the word was out, things were happening, it was all over the rest of the conservative media, so on and so forth. Wow, impressive. I'm not the guy that broke the story. Hey, I read it, on another medium, so it was out there. But the point is that it took, by Wednesday for the president to say what he was going to do. He'll move out of NAFTA with Mexico, this, that, and the other thing, and he talked about Tuesday, then Wednesday about taking and moving troops. By Thursday, Wednesday night, Thursday, we had troop movement. Everybody starts yelling and screaming, oh, you can't send the army, you can't send the army, you can't send the army. Well, he's not sending the army. The president's not sending the army. In fact, the president is doing what? He's calling up the National Guard. Oh my. Now, can he do that? Well, not only can he do that based on his Article 2 powers, and you can go look them up. I'm not going to articulate that to you specifically. But according to his Article 2 powers, he has the absolute right to do that. But even more so, Congress. Mitch McConnell, Paul Ryan, all of you other little weenies, and yes, those two are. I do not have any respect for them. I'm sorry. I wish I could, but they have been part of the swamp for so long now that how do you have respect for these people? Anyway, under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 15, one of the powers required by Congress is to provide for the calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrection, and repel invasion. Ladies and gentlemen, we have had, because of our flawed immigration law, which I'm going to touch on just briefly. I've touched on it in another program where I even have a blog post out there called Immigration, Invasion, Insurrection, and Constitutionalism, where I talk about what Madison said in Federalist 44, some of the things he said in 41 through 45, and so on. Insurrection is not something that we're even talking about. What we're talking about is invasion and having these foreign entities coming into our country illegally, especially in volumes, especially at a regimental size, is an invasion. And that is a violation of our sovereignty. Well, wait a minute. The globalists say we have no sovereignty. Wow. Well, I'm sorry, but, and this is even where the liberal churches, yes, the liberal churches and liberal pastors, liberal denominations absolutely get it wrong. Every nation is to have its own sovereignty. So as I want to look at that just really quickly, there is a very interesting article that I was reading, and I'll have the link to that, and it is written by a Gregory Boss, and he's talking about one of the people that I brought up a few times is Kuyper, and some of the other discussions in here is that these Dewey Weird is a concept, and it's under the Christian ground motive, and in that he talks about the Dewey word holds that the principle of societal sphere sovereignty is rooted in what he calls the ground motive of the Christian religion, which he summarizes as creation, fall, redemption through Christ Jesus. In general, a ground motive is an expression both of individual and communal of one of two possible basic religious commitments or orientations. And it gets into this whole discussion on that. And as we get into what I just said out of the constitutional requirement for Congress to act, so Congress should be acting on this without even questioning the president, the greater force that is there is U.S. Code Title 32, named the National Guard, and talking about not only its organization, and if you go to Title 32, what is really, really important is in Chapter 9. Chapter 9 is Homeland Defense and Activities. And in this, as you go through the definitions and the terms and that relationship on that, it is the right and the duty of the president when invasion or insurrection occurs, but invasion in particular, is to notify the Secretary of Defense to exercise what is this section, Chapter 9, Homeland Defense Activities, under U.S. Code Title 32 for exactly that, 902, Homeland Defense Activities funding, as well as then what that relationship is, and then under 904, Homeland Defense duties. And those duties are to protect our borders. And that is something that we can call, or the president has the right to call under his Article 2 authority, as well as what Congress not only should do, but must do under its Article 1, Section 8, Clause 15 authority. So, you know what? Once again, we have so many people, and especially those that do not understand not only what the Constitution fundamentally says, what is argued from the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist position, which I'll get into a little bit in the next segment, but not even taking the time to go up and look at what U.S. Code says in relationship to calling out the National Guard for such purposes. So you see, ladies and gentlemen, as you well know, all of you who listen to this network and to this programming, it is because we have people not only in civil society, but those within the churches within civil society that have no idea and no understanding of the truth on how our constitutional republic is supposed to function. And if we don't keep driving that home, if we can't continue to find those platforms, and quite frankly, if the media, if the Hannitys, the Ingrams, all of the others do not just look at their emotionalism for their ratings, but don't start to draw in constitutional solutions and answers, then the people will never get educated. And I think that's a travesty right now in the generalized media, even including the so-called conservative media, is that, it's great to say, conservatives do this and conservatives do that, and we've got this list of things that Chaffee gave to Hannity, and Hannity's promoting, and all those types of things. But let's talk about constitutionalism. And what does that mean in the context of the rule of law? So when we come back in the next segment, we're going to talk a little bit about those Federalist, Anti-Federalist perspectives here on Samuel Adams, because he's returning, and the Anti-Federalists, they always get it right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this last segment of Samuel Adams Returns. Those Anti-Federalists got it right. We talked in the first segment a little bit about the Ohio governor primary, and I there recommended that you take a good hard look at those here in Ohio. Take that good hard look at Mary Taylor, because I'll tell you what, when I do all of my vetting checks, which I do a lot, and I'm very, very serious about it, she is the correct candidate for constitutionalism, patriotism, rule of law, business, and even the reduction. Oh, that was something that was really interesting. Just real quick before I get back into the invasion thing, is that there's a study done by George Mason University. So you folks down there in the Virginia market, George Mason University did this study on 22 states and their regulations, impacts on business, all of that. You know what? So New York is number one with the most regulations. Who is it that turns out to be number two? Yeah, Ohio. And so this is under Kasich. This is under a strong, more Republican legislature in Ohio. Okay, somebody can complain, but that's happened over a long period of time. No, why hasn't something been done about it? So the Ohio legislature's doing some things, but Mary Taylor, in her choice of lieutenant governor, is committed to a full force business working group to make Ohio great again and bring those businesses back, in taking and looking at reducing regulations, not only for business, but for, we the people. We got to get rid of these regulations that just choke us. I can get onto more stuff on the Ohio race that's disgusting relative to Kasich and DeWine, and Kasich setting or trying to propose something on education that would make it dictatorial from the governor's office. Never mind. We won't go there. Let's get back to what we were talking about on this invasion, the fact that under Article 2, the president has the right to call out the National Guard by sending and doing exactly what he did. To whom? None other than the Secretary of Defense. The Secretary of Defense then can activate the Guard to go to the border under what? Under Title 32 of the U.S. Code. And the ones that are sitting on their thumbs, sitting on their hands, rolling their eyes into the back of their head, and slobbering all over themselves as people that have major issues or have some kind of a psychedelic overload. You know what? That's what we should call it for them. Sitting on their thumbs, eyeballs rolling into their back of their heads. That's not anything to do with someone that has a medical or mental issue. That has something to do with people on psychedelic drugs called lobbyists and swamp monsters. So that's what they're doing by not exercising what? Not exercising Article 1, Section 8, Clause 15, in that they are supposed to protect us, the U.S., from invasion. All right. So, into that point, Madison was talking about on August 9th, when this whole idea going through on the Senate and the powers of making treaties and what does it mean for citizenship and all of that, and how do you secure the idea that we're not going to have foreign influences in the Senate? They forgot about lobbyists. in the future. But here's what Madison has to say. Madison, during that discussion on August 9th, during the debates on the federal Constitution, he goes, Madison was not averse to some restrictions on this subject, but could never agree to the proposed amendment, which was talking about some of the real specifics on age and a number of other things relative to the Senate. And I'm going to go back in that. He thought any restriction, however, in the Constitution unnecessary and improper. Unnecessary because the national legislature is to have the right of regulating naturalization and can, by virtue thereof, fix different periods of residence as conditions of enjoying different privileges of citizenship. Improper because it will give a tincture of illiberality to the Constitution, because it will put it out of the power of the national legislature, even by special acts of naturalization, to confer the full rank of citizenship on meritorious strangers, and because it will discourage the most desirable class of people from emigrating to the United States. Should the proposed Constitution have the intended effect of giving stability and reputation to our government, great numbers of respectable European men, and now we would say women, who love liberty and wish to partake in its blessings, love liberty, respectable people who love liberty and wish to partake in its blessings will be ready to transfer their fortunes hither to the U.S. All such would feel the mortification of being marked with suspicious incapacitation, though they should not covet the public honors. He was not apprehensive that any dangerous number of strangers would be appointed by the state legislatures if they were left at liberty to do so, nor that foreign powers would make use of strangers. Here we go. Here it is, lobbyist stuff. Nor that foreign powers would make use of strangers as instruments of this purpose. Their bribes would be expended on men whose circumstances would rather stifle than excite jealousies and watchfulness in the public. Oh, wow, the last couple of sentences right there are George Soros all over the place and what's going on. Now, I want to go into in the Anti-Federalist Papers, in some of the various discussions that were going on, in particular, just all over the place on invasion. So we can quote over and over from the various Anti-Federalist Papers, and we'll go with Anti-Federalist number 3. This was Plubius, and one of the things that he was talking about on invasion is that a national government will prevent the influence of danger of foreign intrigue or secure us from invasion is, in my judgment, directly reverse of the truth. What? He didn't believe it. The only foreign, or at least evil foreign influence, must be obtained through corruption. Where the government is lodged in the body of the people, as in Switzerland, they can never be corrupted. For no prince or people can have resources enough to corrupt the majority of a nation. And if they could, the play is not worth the candle. The faculty of corruption is increased in proportion as power tends by representation or delegation to the concentration in the hands of a few. Wow. That's really interesting that we're talking about that from the Anti-Federalist perspective. Well, let's move on down. Here's another one from, let's say, Anti-Federalist number 5, Scotland and England. This one was a rebuttal that was coming in on the Federalist number 5, and this was written by an observer, and it was printed in New York on December 3rd, in talking about invasion. He was talking about It deserves also to be remembered that the people of Scotland in the late war between France and Great Britain petitioned to have arms and ammunition supplied them by their general government. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. This is about people, all right? For their defense, alleging that they were incapable of defending themselves and their property from an invasion unless they were assisted by the government. Well, that's kind of an interesting principle that some of us talk about relative to our government arming us as a general people. Well, I don't want the government to arm me because then they throw all sorts of nonsense in there, but we have that right to be armed. Not only that, it was supposed to be the citizens' militias that went down onto the border, but because of what happened during Truman, World War II, all of those other things, that we nationalized our state militias, and the states capitulated to that, hence the National Guard. And we already talked about that in Title 32. I can go on and on with over 100 references from the anti-federalist writing, talking about invasion, talking about protecting ourselves, using examples as Scotland and so forth. But what I need to do is take that, which is a truism, and the bottom line being that Donald Trump has every right to do what he did. Congress are, babbling and so drug-induced with the swamp power and some of the things that we talked about from international power, so on and so forth, and corruption to the extent that they're not going to exercise their Article 1, Section 8 authority. And so we're going to do what we should do and get the National Guard down on the border. Now, let's segue to that because it's very, very important that you understand that we've got all of those different problems because we have taken and destroyed the whole truth and essence of constitutionalism. So yes, I'm going to take the last few minutes here to plug my new book. What is it? It is From Covenant to the Present Constitution. And this is the workbook. There's the cover, ladies and gentlemen. Let me put myself, how about that one? Oh, and right over my head, you can see my last book. So what we have here, just in the cover alone, this is covenant. Covenant goes all the way back, not just to biblical times, and that's what I talk about in the book, and a whole section on covenant. We do not understand covenant any longer. We don't know what it means. We don't know what it came from. We don't understand covenant even when it comes to the aspects of rule of law. So there's a lot there. We don't understand covenant from a societal basis. So that's where I start. I start and even talk about suzerain covenant. And what is that? That goes way back into ancient times. And then what does it mean to draw it in from a biblical perspective? What does it mean to bring it together? And I actually use a very interesting rabbi who has studied this and goes all the way back to one of the reformers by the name of Althusius, who isn't really taught anymore, although there are a lot of folks that do. And from the covenant, then I have, if you see there, the present Constitution. You see, the Constitution is all struck, marked up, and that. Well, fundamentally, the paper portion of the Constitution hasn't changed. But what I bring out in my lecture, and that's what this workbook draws together, is what happened. What happened? And I go through that. And we'll talk about little bits and pieces, sections here. But you know what? You can find more about this at SamuelAdamsReturns.com. And if you go in there where it talks about books, you'll see that on the home page. And you click on that to this book, From Covenant to the Present Constitution. In the bottom of the description, you can actually read a section of the book. And the section of the book that you can read for free is my author's comments and the introduction. So the book is available. You'll see there on the website where it's available. It's 304 pages. Ladies and gentlemen, this is 8.5 by 11. It is packed with information and references. You can email me at tom@samueladamsreturns.com to get your signed copy. I just got some in today. And if you want a signed copy of this, email me. It's $20 in shipping. So, very simple, very basic. And Sam Adams has a lot to say in here as well. So we will see you next week. Those that watch this on YouTube and you on Liberty Works Radio Network, come on back to Samuel Adams Returns, because those anti-federalists, you know it, they got it right.